Imagine sitting in this, like, dark prison cell, and you're facing 20 months locked away. And your crime. Literally just retweeting a cartoon.
Yeah, I mean, it's a situation where almost anyone would just apologize, right? You sign the confession, you wait for a later sentence, and you try to get out.
Exactly. But the guy we're talking about today, he didn't do that. He's a complex systems physicist. And instead of confessing, he decided to write a 20,000-word mathematical proof from his cell to show his captors that his crime literally violated the laws of physics.
It is an incredible document. He actually calls it a blood letter. It was written from a Kunming prison cell by Dr. Chen Yuan, who is a physicist born in 1976.
And what's wild is we aren't just looking at his letter in isolation today.
Mm-hmm.
We've got this truly unprecedented stack of sources. Alongside his defense, we had these comprehensive, independent evaluations of his exact case, generated by 6 different advanced AI models.
Right, so we're talking about ChatGPT, Copilot, DeepSeek, Gemini, Grok, and Qwen, all 6 of them analyzing the exact same legal and honestly philosophical nightmare.
So our mission today is to really unpack this astonishing collision between modern physics, humanistic psychology, and the legal system. Dr. Chen was sentenced to 20 months in prison for the crime of picking quarrels and provoking trouble, simply for using a VPN to retweet content on Twitter.
It's a fascinating intersection. You have a highly trained human mind fighting for autonomy using network topology, and on the flip side, you have artificial intelligence systems independently dissecting how the human institutions that locked him up completely broke down.
And before we go any further, I do need to address you, the listener, directly for a second. The sources we're diving into today contain politically charged content and legal disputes regarding the Chinese government. I want to explicitly clarify that neither of us here as your guides are taking any political sides, left-wing or right-wing.
Yeah, absolutely. We are impartially reporting on the content provided to us. We aren't endorsing the viewpoints of the original source material. We're simply conveying the ideas and the analyses contained within it.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this. We're going to explore how Dr. Chen used network topology to mathematically disprove his crime, how the court somehow weaponized his PhD against him, and how psychology explains his really profound resilience.
Let's start with the physical crime itself, because it sets the stage for everything. The case files show that Dr. Chen basically retweeted 4 distinct types of posts.
Right. There was art and cartoons, I think specifically the Hong Kong umbrella girl image.
Yeah, that one, and also a satirical cartoon of Xi Jinping and Donald Trump. Then there were emotional expressions, like he shared a candle commemorating June 4th.
Okay, so art, emotional posts, what else?
He also shared various political theories and finally just some historical materials. And the court looked at this and ruled that these retweets were rumors that caused a severe disorder of public order.
Severe disorder. I mean, that's a heavy charge for a retweet.
It is. The legal threshold that the court applied relies on this idea of a massive destabilizing physical cascade of information. But this is where Dr. Chen's defense gets amazing. He didn't just argue for free speech on moral grounds. He used actual science to dismantle the charge.
Because he's a physicist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He applied principles of complex systems. Specifically, he used the Galton-Watson extinction theorem in avalanche dynamics, and he applied them directly to the architecture of his own Twitter account.
It's like the prosecution claiming a single drop of water caused a tsunami in a teacup. But the math proves the teacup was already empty.
That is a great way to put it.
But wait, let me push back on this for a second. Couldn't a single tweet theoretically go viral and cause, like, a butterfly effect? I mean, isn't that exactly how social media works? We see nobody accounts go viral all the time.
Well, the legal system made that exact intuitive leap. They assume that because information can cascade, any piece of information might cascade, but intuition isn't physics. To create a system-wide event, what physicists actually call an avalanche, you need highly specific structural conditions within a network. So Dr. Chen mapped his own network topology for the court, and the data in the sources shows he had fewer than 100 followers.
Less than 100. That's tiny.
And mostly zombie accounts, too. Inactive, automated bots.
Okay, so structurally, his network couldn't transmit a signal very far.
Right. It relies on a concept called the branch number. Think of it like the basic reproduction number in epidemiology, the R0.
Oh, like with a virus.
Yeah.
If the R0 is above 1, it spreads exponentially.
Exactly. So for his retweets to trigger severe disorder, the branch number of those posts would have to be greater than 1. But Dr. Chen calculated his average branch number, and it was drastically lower than 1.
Which means the chain reaction inherently decays. It physically can't sustain itself.
Yes. And that brings us to the Galton-Watson theorem. It's this 19th century math originally developed to study whether aristocratic family surnames would go extinct.
Wait, really? Family names?
Yeah. The math says if the average number of male heirs in a family is less than 1, the surname is mathematically guaranteed to die out. Network scientists use that exact same math to model information.
Oh, wow. So because his branch number was less than 1, his information was guaranteed to die out.
Precisely. In physics terms, this places him in the deep subcritical zone. In a subcritical state, the mathematical probability of a chain reaction sustaining itself approaches absolute 0. He literally proved that the probability of his retweets causing a systemic avalanche or severe disorder was statistically 0.
So if science proves there was no actual chaos, and the math clears him of causing a physical cascade, how did the court prove his subjective malicious intent? I mean, they must have had to shift tactics, right?
They did, and this leads directly into some truly bizarre legal logic. The court couldn't point to actual chaos, so they focused on his intent. The ruling essentially stated that because Dr. Chen has a high educational background and knowledge level, meaning his PhD, he should be able to distinguish right from wrong.
Wait, because he's smart, he knowingly spread rumors.
That was the exact legal reasoning. Therefore, he knowingly spread rumors.
I mean, playing devil's advocate here, isn't it somewhat reasonable for a judge to assume a highly educated scientist knows exactly what they are reading and sharing? Like, they should be held to a higher standard of fact-checking.
It sounds plausible until you look at what philosophers call a category mistake. And this is a massive violation of the legal principle against the presumption of guilt. Dr. Chen realized he had to dismantle the court's definition of truth itself.
How do you even do that from a prison cell?
He used Karl Popper's theory of falsifiability and Kurt Gödel's incompleteness theorem. Popper argued that for a statement to be considered a factual claim, it must be testable. It has to be able to be proven false.
Right, falsifiability.
So Dr. Chen points out the absurdity of applying this to his retweets. You cannot falsify a cartoon of an umbrella girl.
Oh, I see.
You can't objectively test a commemorative candle to determine if the grief it represents is mathematically true or false. Art, political philosophy, human emotion, they don't exist on a binary spectrum of factual truth, so they cannot legally be categorized as rumors.
So the court was basically pointing at a painting, calling it a deliberate lie, and demanding a physicist apologize for it. That's completely illogical.
It gets deeper with Gödel's incompleteness theorem. Gödel proved in 1931 that any sufficiently complex logical system will always contain statements that are true, but fundamentally unprovable within the rules of that system.
Meaning human reason has intrinsic limits.
Exactly. Dr. Chen showed that the legal system was trying to force absolute truth onto a closed formal system. The irony is incredible. His scientific training made him a skeptic, it taught him cognitive humility, and made him question absolute truth.
But the court demanded blind certainty.
Right. They weaponized his intellect against him. They demanded he use his PhD to definitively label art and philosophy as objectively true or false, which is impossible.
Okay, I want you to imagine being in Dr. Chen's shoes for a second. You are locked in a room, you are deprived of sleep, facing a system that completely ignores basic logic. Why write a highly academic 20,000-word treatise instead of just pleading guilty to get a lighter sentence?
It requires a staggering amount of psychological endurance. And this is where the AI models brought in a really fascinating humanistic psychology lens.
Right, they looked at his mental state.
Yeah, they invoked Abraham Maslow, Carl Rogers, and Viktor Frankl. The models observed that the system was trying to impose what Carl Rogers calls conditions of worth on Dr. Chen.
Meaning, you're only valuable if you confess.
Exactly. Confess, conform to the narrative, and get leniency. Resist, and get crushed.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's like trying to force a square peg into a round hole using a hydraulic press. But the peg decides to write a physics paper about the pressure instead of changing its shape.
That's a brilliant way to conceptualize it. Dr. Chen exhibited the ultimate will to meaning. That's Viktor Frankl's concept, the idea that humans are driven by an innate need to find meaning in suffering.
Because Frankl survived the Holocaust, right?
Mm-hmm.
He wrote about finding purpose even in the darkest places.
Yes. Dr. Chen consciously reframed his entire environment. He wrote that he stopped viewing his cell as a punishment and started treating it as a civilizational experiment.
Wow.
He knew the judges wouldn't understand his math, so he bypassed them. He maintained his authentic self by writing for future readers. He refused to undergo dehumanization, being reduced to a mere risk node by the legal system.
He transformed a physical cage into a space of ultimate intellectual freedom. It's incredibly powerful. But his psychological survival is deeply tied to his critique of the whole system, which begs the question, how did the 6 different AI models evaluate the legal system's actions as a whole?
When you feed this kind of complex human rights case into Gemini, ChatGPT, DeepSeek, Grok, Copilot, and Quinn, you might expect some divergence.
Or hallucinations, yeah.
But the synthesis of the sources shows a unanimous consensus. All 6 models concluded the case was a systemic failure. The court illegally expanded a pocket crime, the vague charge of picking quarrels to police thought and expression.
Taking a law meant for, like, street brawls and using it on a physicist sharing a cartoon.
Exactly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the AI models found that this conviction fundamentally violates Article 35 of the Chinese Constitution, which guarantees freedom of speech.
So it's not just a misapplication of physics, it's a constitutional violation.
And a cultural one. The models pointed out that it directly contradicts the state's own promoted ideology. The state talks about building a community of common destiny and civilizational diversity.
Right.
By treating intellectual exploration and diverse viewpoints as a crime, the legal system acted in direct opposition to human civilizational progress.
Because progress literally requires testing hypotheses and open exchange, the exact things he was doing.
Precisely. The system demanded that reality conform to its oversimplified, binary rules instead of adapting to the complexity of the real world.
So what does this all mean? Dr. Chen explicitly stated he was writing his defense not for the judge who wouldn't listen, but for the future reader. And, it hits me that you, the listener right now, are that exact future reader he was hoping to reach.
It really is profound.
His attempt to preserve a record of rationality in a moment of systemic irrationality worked.
We're reading it, we're talking about it.
It shows the incredible endurance of human thought. But I want to leave you with a final, unmentioned concept inspired by these sources to mull over. Throughout this deep dive, we relied on 6 advanced AI models to impartially dissect the cognitive biases, logical fallacies, and procedural failures of human judges.
They saw right through the flawed logic that the human court used.
Right. So, if a human justice system can become so blinded by institutional rules and subjective assumptions that it ignores basic physics and logic, will the future of objective justice eventually require AI judges to evaluate the law?
Or, and this is the unsettling part, would an AI simply inherit the very conditions of worth, programmed by the flawed system that builds it?
If the AI is trained on that same flawed human data, it might just automate the injustice perfectly.
Exactly. An unfeeling machine flawlessly executing illogical rules.
That is definitely something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the information around you.